Starting off the positional previews for every player on the Pacers roster this season with deep dives into centers, one stat, one question, and one skill for Jay Huff, James Wiseman, Isaiah Jackson, and Tony Bradley coming today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Friday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, starting the first of 5 positional previews of the upcoming season for the Pacers today, deep dives into the centers. James Wiseman, Jay Huff, Isaiah Jackson, and Tony Bradley. Today, the way we're going to do this is similar to how I've done stuff in the past with previews, sometimes with Kalen Cooper, sometimes without. One stat, one skill, one question about every player at each position. Today will be a little overclogged with 4 players. Power forwards will be a little underclogged. We'll do some fudgery to get 3 into every other position. But today is the centers, and it'll be really fun to see this one shake out because it's a dramatically changed position from last year's Miles Turner, Thomas Bryant rotation, completely different. And that's why there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of stats. There's a lot of, this is a new guy, the newest guy in the rotation in Jay Huff, and so much to get into. We're going to start with Isaiah Jackson, who I slightly lean towards being the starter, even though I truly have no idea. If you need me to guess right now, in the order we'll go through is one stat, one skill, and one question for these players. One stat for Isaiah Jackson, and some people who are maybe not even his biggest detractors per se, but think people are really skipping past this when talking about Isaiah Jackson, that I see, especially when it comes to him potentially being a starting center, which requires being on the floor for 20 plus minutes a game. You stay on the floor, you stay out of foul trouble. And this has, even as Jackson has improved in his career, been one of his biggest bugaboos for forever is his foul rate. He fouls a lot. 2 years ago, in 2023-24, he led the NBA in fouls per 100 possessions, right? Per 36, it was 6.4. Last year's only 5 games, 6 fouls per 36. If you've been a long-time listener to Locked On Pacers, you'll know I did a really deep dive into Isaiah Jackson fouls at one point a season and a half ago, which sounds silly, but it was very purposeful because he did get better at something in that he stopped doing as many stupid fouls. So he cut down his charges, his reach in when he gave up the balls, his just dumb, useless, don't actually benefit the game that much fouls. You're not actually preventing something. It's not as helpful of an infraction, which sounds silly to say, but it was higher IQ fouls. There was a lot of less dumb, why did Isaiah Jackson do that kind of fouls? It's still a lot of fouls. He's still very jumpy when he wants to try to stop a shot. He's gotten better at that, to his credit, noticeably better at that, to be clear. His block rate's still very high. These are things that are improving things in his game. That's not to say these are huge problems that have always been huge problems, but he did lead the league in this his last full season, right? He does need to find a way to cut down his foul rate if he's going to be on the floor, as much as he certainly probably hopes he can be, and as much as the Pacers might need him to be as possibly their starting center this season, because he is a very good defensive player. He can move his feet. He could guard lots of players for lots of time. You got to be on the floor to do those things. You got to be on the floor to get better and be a team starting center. That is the next step for Isaiah Jackson to me. One stat, fouls per 36. I meant to say one skill dramatically, and I messed it up. One skill for Isaiah Jackson. Jump shot? Question mark. Here's why I chose this, because Isaiah Jackson has slowly but surely kind of uncorked longer shots in his career. He's kind of explored the space, even as his shot distance, his average shot distance has gone down. You've seen him kind of, dabble with a long 2 here. There's an elbow jumper there. And even then, he still tries to up the volume of his shots that come right at the basket because that's where he's at his best. But I'll never, ever forget a few years ago, we were talking to Miles Turner in a practice scrum, and someone mentioned something about oh, do you think Isaiah could expand his range or something about that? And he says, man, I hate when you guys talk like that or ask the question like that. He can already shoot. And that was interesting to me because I'm like, he doesn't, right? He doesn't really shoot at all. His percentage of his shots that were threes, his career high is 7.8%. For his career, it's 4.4%. Last year, he did not take a three. He did not take a single one. He took 4 the year before, right? I'm not saying he should get all the way out to threes, but can he add any sort of jumper, right? Because the case for Huff starting, and why some people think he will, and I can't even say this is a stupid argument, is that he's closer to Miles Turner-y, and for a fit with Pascal Siakam, having that jump shot, having that range, just natural standing still spacing is valuable. I can't deny that at all. And Jackson provides vertical spacing and forces people to rotate to under the basket, but isn't forcing players to get away from the basket as often when he's just standing away from the play. That's not to say you don't have spacing at all. Guys in the dunker spot still, demand attention, but he literally didn't make a shot outside of 10 feet last season. Granted, again, 5 games, but I want to see this year if he can add any sort of night in, night out, he's taking a jump shot, just 1 or 2. And it's like, yep, that's fine, right? That's a fine shot for him to be taking at that volume, right? Jalen Smith developed his jumper tremendously. Obi Toppin did. We'll talk more about jumper development with other centers coming up, certainly. But that is something that I wonder if it could come for Isaiah Jackson, because that would meaningfully change where he can stand and the geometry of the floor around him. And again, in the context of, can he be a starter? Should he be the starter? This is another thing, just like the first stat of, well, if this gets better, that increases the chances of him being on the floor to open games and him potentially fitting in that 5. And if he's going to be the Pacers' best center, that's a good way to do it. So endlessly fascinated by my one skill for James Wiseman, his ability to potentially just shoot jump shots, right? And that leads to the one question. And his is probably the most obvious of anyone's on this list. This technically applies to James Wiseman, but we've seen less of him and he's been in the Pacers system for less time. Isaiah Jackson, my one question for you for your fifth season in the NBA. That's crazy to say. What strengths of his will remain, right? Because he is a very, very interesting player to be returning from a torn Achilles. What made Isaiah Jackson great as a 5? He runs like a gazelle. End to end of the floor, he's the fastest center on the court, almost always. He can jump out of the gym. His best dunks are crazy. Right? Think back to his summer league. He's blocking Corey Kispert around the end of the floor, dunk on the other end, stealing he's just so athletic. And so people always say players can guard 1 through 5, and they're always wrong. And I would say Isaiah Jackson, honestly, probably can't guard point guards all the time and really struggles with the bulkiest centers. But he can credibly guard some players at every position. And that's super rare in the NBA. He's got the foot speed for it. He did enough with centers because of his ability to jump. He can block shots, obviously. He's mobile. He can switch. That's all great. Can you still do those things, right? That is a post-torn Achilles question that will really matter for Isaiah Jackson. If he's just a little less bouncy, that'll hurt his block rate. If he's just a little less shifty side to side or not as fast, that'll hurt the number of players he can stay in front of. And for a player that I thought was always slightly better on the defensive end than the offensive end, look at that. That would be a big loss. Now, he's still a good player on offense and has been efficient. His true shooting percentage has been 60 or more in 3 of his 4 seasons, and the one it was under was 59.5, right? That's fine, but he just shoots right around the basket, and he dunks a lot. Dunking is good. People crap on dunking as oh, you only dunk. Yeah, dunking's good. He had 72 dunks his last full season, 82 the season before. That's a lot of dunks. You have to be athletic to get above the rim and finish well. And he's gotten way better as a finisher throughout his career. There's a lot of reasons to believe in Isaiah Jackson. He's a developing, talented player, getting better at a lot of the stuff that I talked about in this segment. And that's all great. I think he can continue to get better at these things, but there is a problem in that he might have a physical limitation. And that will be a huge question. Can you still do the things that make you Isaiah Jackson, that make you interesting? And guess what? The Pacers paid him like they believe that yes. The answer is yes to that question, right? You don't give a guy a contract that would have been matched with his value of what he was pre-injury if you don't think he can be that player again post-injury. We'll see if he actually is and what that actually looks like, because any loss there would meaningfully, to me, change the opinion of Isaiah Jackson. But he could also add some of the other skills that I already talked about and shift that perception back in his favor. Really interesting player. Really looking forward to seeing year five of Isaiah Jackson. Are you feeling old? It feels like he's been on the Pacers for 2 seconds, and it's about to be his 5th season. Speaking of players who it's about to be their 5th season, Jay Huff Could he start? Will he be the backup? Lots of questions here. New rotation player. I have so much to talk about with Jay Huff previewing his season for the Pacers coming up right here on Locked On Pacers. Before we do that, quick breaks we can talk about FanDuel. The NFL season is here. Crazy first game. And FanDuel, after Cowboys, Eagles, and many upcoming games, is making sure you are ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. If your bet wins, guess what? You'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Many people love using FanDuel because fits however they like to bet. Player props, they've got them. Building same game parlay, you can do that. Jumping on live action as you're chilling at your house. Perfect, easy peasy. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy. It's the best way to add a little more energy into your Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen, Locked On NBA Game Night. John Corrales and I talked about Cam Thomas signing his qualifying offer, and more importantly, for a long time, the newest revelation on Kawhi Leonard and his contract stuff going on, or maybe different contract stuff. John Corrales was my co-host, and he did more reporting on Kawhi with a second secret deal that was lesser, not really in the original reporting, and we got to dive into that. Very interesting. You should check out that for your second listen. Let's talk about Jay Huff. Really, really fascinated to watch Jay Huff in a real role for a good team. He was on a decent team last year with a small role. He was on a bad Wizards team. He was on an okay Lakers team, but only played 4 games. He was on a good Nuggets team, but barely ever played. He played 49 minutes. Now he's a real player. But sort of, right? This is one of the questions I've existentially had about him is there's kind of a certainty that he'll be decent or good. And I, to be clear, feel that way too. Like I'm pretty sure he'll be at least a rotation level player. And then he's played 95 games in 912 minutes, right? In his whole career. And he's 28. So still questions about what that's actually going to look like. But let's talk about Jay Huff. Jay Huff, one stat for me is passes. And this is kind of a question, but it's also a stat. It's a fit thing. So much is made about fit with the Pacers, with other players. Well, Jay Huff's new. It's a new system. It's really challenging. And so much is made of it because the Pacers play a unique style that works. And part of it is passing the ball, passing it a lot, keeping the ball moving, being able to play random. And the Pacers want to lead the league in passes. I wrote a whole story on this, on the why. It makes sense intuitively. Their talent makes it possible. It makes them hard to defend. Last year, Jay Huff averaged 9.7 passes made per game in his about 12 minutes a night. 9.7. That is well under Thomas Bryant. That is well under Isaiah Jackson. That is less than half of every other Pacers rotation player who played last year. It is right around the number of passes per game of Ray J. Dennis, who obviously was a point guard who played 6 minutes a game. The only Pacers players it was above from last year are Johnny Furphy, Enrique Freeman, Tony Bradley, James Wiseman, James Johnson, and Jahlil Okafor. If Jay Huff's going to play sizable minutes on the Pacers, he's got to be a better and more capable and willing passer. The Grizzlies did not require him to pass. I am not saying this is something he cannot do, which is why it's in the stat category and not a question category. But I wonder what that's going to look like. What's his ball movement and quick decision-making really going to lead to for him in the context of the Pacers needing him to maybe do fulcrum-y stuff? Think about a lot of Miles Turner's passes last year. Let's compare that number. Miles Turner, by the way, 26 passes per game last season. A lot of Miles Turner would catch the ball at the top, immediately turn to the other side and swing it or pitch it or throw it right back to the guy who threw it to him. He got really good at reading which side of the floor the ball should go to. Jay Huff's going to have to learn that and figure out what it takes for certain players, how it keeps the defense off balance, off tilt, and how he can get the best shots or the team get the best shots out of it. That's a big adjustment for the Pacers and a big switch from what he was doing with Memphis. Passes per game, passing. Jay Huff, how many passes can you throw and throw them well? His assist rate last year, a balmy 7%. That's not very high, if you didn't know. So I'll be very curious to see what the Pacers get out of Jay Huff as a passer because he's good at lots of other stuff, right? And that's kind of, I actually want to skip to question just to keep the tone correct for this segment. But I actually wonder, question-wise, for Jay Huff, what is the limit for his shooting in terms of attempts? That dude can shoot like at volume in a way that is maybe even understated when talking about his spacing and shooting ability. Not that people haven't talked about his shooting. In fact, people have talked a lot about his shooting. His case for starting is that he is the closest skill comp to Turner of any center that they have in terms of not the ability that he has with those skills, but in terms of the matching like principles of what you do. Jay Huff takes threes. Jay Huff blocks shots, right? That's sort of what Miles Turner did. And so Jay Huff took a lot of threes last year, if you were unaware. Of his shots, 65.6% of them came from three. He took 11 threes in one game last year. Per 36 minutes, he took 9.6 threes per 36. That's a ton. And he should shoot a lot of threes because he's a good shooter. He made over 40% of them. For context on 9.6 threes attempted per 36 minutes, last year's Pacers, who granted probably should have taken more threes, they finished 21st in the league in 3-point attempts per game. Only Tristan Newton and Ray J. Dennis, two guys who are certainly boosted by small sample sizes, have a higher per 36 3-point attempt rate than Jay Huff did last year. Again, Jay Huff took 9.6 threes per 36 last year. Haliburton was the Pacers leader over the rotation players at 8.3. So, whoa, that's going to be fascinating to see you with the Pacers this year. And what is the true limit of that? Can that be 10 for the Pacers reasonably? Is that the best thing for the Pacers for that to be 10? Or does he need to go inside the arc more often and find the right volume? Is there going to be a balance question to happen here? Or is the answer really going to be, Jay Huff, go shoot 10 per 36. If you start and you're playing 30 minutes, you're taking 7 threes in that game. When they play Detroit, and Detroit sags off the center like they did to Miles Turner every time last year, is Jay Huff just going to go crazy? Right? I'll be very curious where this lands. Miles Turner, for reference, took 6.5 threes per 36 minutes last year. Ironically, it's made me think about Obi Toppin, who came to the Pacers and really upped his shooting ability. He took 7 threes per 36 last year. And he was like getting better as a shooter with the Knicks. He was at 30.6%, then 30.8, then 34.4 his 3 seasons there. Immediately jumped to 40. His percentage went way up, but his volume kind of stayed the same in terms of how often he was shooting threes. His last season with the Knicks, he actually took a ton, 8.5 threes per 36. Then it dropped to 5.3 his first year with the Pacers and back up to 7 last year. So that kind of suggested to me, but he was also going through like a transformational form thing and got much better as a shooter. Where's Huff going to go? Is he going to drop down as the Pacers try to add to his shot diet? Is he going to, is he going to go through an Obi Toppin kind of thing where there's some development going on, but he's still, limited in how many, or is he just going to be able to take 10? And that is maybe the best way for him to play, but then he's not doing as much at the basket. I don't know, but the amount he shoots now is fascinating, and I can't wait to see how much he's allowed to shoot for the Pacers this year. My one skill, physicality, right? This is something Rick Carlisle always talks about. Is something he believes to be valuable in the modern NBA. Beyond pace is physical play, physicality, things of that nature, especially sustaining it for a full-length basketball game. That was key points of emphasis for Jarris Walker last year and lots of young centers. Jay Huff is good at lots of things. Joe Mullinax, who covered him last year, said that he believed him to be a good rebounder. The numbers do not agree with that. In a lot of places, a lot of people I've talked to don't think he's a good rebounder. Not that anyone thinks he's like necessarily bad. But can he provide some sort of physicality as a rebounder? His rebound rate last year, total rebound rate, was 9.1%, right? For references for the Pacers roster last year, a 9.1% rebound rate would give you about the likes of Ray J. Dennis, James Johnson, Aaron Nesmith. Miles Turner had a 12.1% rebound rate last year, right? What kind of physicality is Jay Huff going to provide on the glass as a foul drawer, which is a stat we'll talk about with a different player later, but he did not draw many fouls and doesn't draw a ton of fouls in general. 22 shooting fouls, John, for Jay Huff. Last year, 28 in his entire career. We're about to talk about a lower number of that for another player coming up. So, between the rebounding part of this, the fouling part of this, the defensive part of this too, he's a good shot blocker. Can he parlay that into any sort of physical defensive plays? Jay Huff's physicality and how it morphs for the Pacers and their needs, especially with rebounding and defense, is going to be a major thing for his development with the Pacers and their ability to have a strong defensive five on the floor for 48 minutes versus 40 versus 30, whatever that's going to end up being. and that is your J Huff. One stat, one skill, one everything. Let's get to the final two guys, Tony Bradley, James Wiseman. We're going to slap them into one segment because I don't have the time for everybody today. We'll finish up with those two right here on Locked On Pacers. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making this your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen, Locked On Nets. Cam Thomas signed the qualifying offer. That's not good for the Nets. That's not good for Cam Thomas. Does Ben Mathurin care about this? Or do the Pacers feel? Well, Locked On Nets will have the answer to the Cam Thomas equation. Listen, if you have some new takeaways, great. You can apply that to whatever you think should happen with Bennedict, Mathurin. Two more centers to get to today. James Wiseman and Tony Bradley. Let's start with Wiseman. We'll actually probably spend a little more time on him. It seems more reasonable to me that he'd be the Pacers' third center. My one stat for him is shot distance, and specifically his shot distance compared to his true shooting percentage and what that means for him and the rest of the Pacers. This is a good thing that I'm about to run through, but it will sound like, from a team level perspective, a bad thing. James Wiseman's career. Average shot distance per season. Rookie year with Golden State, average shot distance was 9 feet. His second season, where he split time with Golden State and Detroit, it was his third season in the NBA, but second season playing. His average shot distance was 6.3 feet. His final season with the Pistons, his average shot distance was 4.8 feet. And then last year at the Pacers, he played for 1 game in 5 minutes. So his average shot distance doesn't matter. It was 14 feet. Regardless, in real seasons, in real full-length seasons, his shot distance continues to drop on average, and he's a very good finisher. Last season, almost 90% of his shots came from 10 feet and in. He shot 78.7%. This is his last full season, to be clear. 78.7% from 0 to 3 feet. That's great, right? That's great. The Pacers should want him to be finishing a lot around the basket. What is the trade-off if the Pacers want James Wiseman to develop a jumper? What is the trade-off of average shot distance and true shooting for him? Can they get him, like I mentioned with Isaiah Jackson, to space out just a little bit more? But then the question is, good Lord, James Wiseman's true shooting percentage got better every year of his career, right? What is that trade-off actually worth it? Do they want him to space out? Does that actually hurt his efficiency? That's a stat that I'm very curious about, is how for him, every year that his shot distance on average has gone down, his true shooting percentage has gone up. Can the Pacers find the right balance in a way that adds skill to Wiseman while still keeping that trend where it needs to be? One skill for James Wiseman: can you defend in space? Keep those feet moving, get some steals, get some blocks. His block rate's okay. His steal rate's not particularly high, although centers don't usually have a high steal rate. Can he apply, though, any sort of defensive playmaking to his game, make defenders wary of his arms? Because his presence is enormous. He's huge. He's fast for somebody of his size, right? What's that going to actually look like this season is the question we're about to get to. But I'll be very curious if James Wiseman can add some of those things defensively, because defending in space has been a hurdle for him. He's been on some tough teams in terms of the point guard he's been playing with is also not a good defender, so he's got a lot to do. This year, that will not be the case if he plays any time with injured Nembhard or McConnell. Honestly, they at least fight and battle, so that could help him a lot, and I'll be very curious to see defensively how well he's able to move his feet and stuff. You could apply the same Jackson question to Wiseman if you wanted, just about health and how it will apply, because a lot of the case I've made for him being interesting to me is that he's huge and fast, right? You can see him. A guy I always talk about how much his size, just raw size, wowed me in the hallways of Gainbridge Fieldhouse at Media Day last year. And that's true. And it's similar to Jackson in one way, in that you got to be able to maintain that stuff to be awesome post-injury, and that's going to be challenging for both of those guys. So, of course, I could use the same question again here about recovery. I'm not going to, though. My question about James Wiseman: who is your best point guard partner on the Pacers? Does that influence who and what he plays with, right? Some players like Obi Toppin, like Ben Shepherd, clearly kind of fit in better or have shown solid synergy with TJ McConnell, or at least they're the best guys at fitting with him, cutting off of him, getting into open space and making shots. Other guys have played with him to lesser success or lesser obvious chemistry. But I'll be very curious for James Wiseman. Can he be a McConnell player? Can he really mash with bench groups? Can his size just swallow point guards in a way that makes McConnell's life easy and makes Lob's easy? Or is he going to be better with the starters, sans Haliburton, right? Can he really open things up for Nembhard in the way Isaiah Jackson does? They have good synergy. And that could be helpful for figuring out what Wiseman's role should be, who he should be playing with, and all sorts of stuff like that. I did a deep dive into him not very long ago. if you want to hear more about that. But figuring out who his best point guard partner is on the Pacers will be like not an easy task to accomplish, but something I think they should try to figure out with James Wiseman this season. Get him in the best possible scenario to succeed as much as possible. Our final player today, still around for now, Tony Bradley. I did not make any of my things, just his contract situation. That's boring. Although that is a big question about him. So one stat and one skill for Tony Bradley are similar. They're just on opposite ends of the floor. One stat, Tony Bradley, the stat is 2, just the raw number 2. That is the number of fouls Tony Bradley drew last season with the Pacers. 2 fouls. The season before that he played with the Bulls, he played 12 games. He did not draw a single foul. That means his last 26 NBA games in the regular season, he's drawn a total of 2 shooting fouls. That's got to be higher. And I know he just shoots around the basket and is not like drawing contact. No one's like, we got to foul Tony Bradley to stop whatever this is. His free throw rate's not super high. He's got to draw some fouls. As a 5-man, your floor of foul drawing just has to be higher. It's not like he's a crazy free throw guy, but they've got to find a way, and he's got to find a way to be just a little bit more physical with the shots he does take in a way that actually leads to contact. But his free throw rate's not a joke because he doesn't actually shoot that much, and that's part of drawing fouls, is taking shots. 3.2 shots per game last season. Only one that season with the Bulls where he did not draw a single foul. Draw some fouls, and on the other end, stop fouling. Similar to Isaiah Jackson. The fouls per 100 possessions leader in 2019-20 was Tony Bradley. That has obviously been moved to Isaiah Jackson 3 seasons later. By the way, Isaiah Jackson led the league in offensive rebounds per 100 possessions that season as well. He's a very good rebounder, like underratedly solid as a rebounder. So not only should Tony Bradley draw some fouls, he should stop fouling. He fouls a little too much, and it's not like a requirement that he stays on the floor. It's not the end of the world, but for a guy who defensively needs to really clog up space and be a threat around the rim because he's not going to be able to guard out on the perimeter too much. Like you can't just be fouling all the time or guys are going to keep going at you over and over. Free throws are such a solid floor of offensive success. He's got to draw some fouls and he's got to not foul. That'll help his efficiency floor quite a bit. And last question, the question about Tony Bradley. This one is more existential about like his spot on the team a little bit, I suppose. Can he show more than someone else? And that question seems fair because he did that last year. In the playoffs and in the finals, there were matchups and situations where he was legitimately a better choice than Thomas Bryant. And Thomas Bryant is more skilled. He's a better shooter. He's faster. He, for most of the season, basically all of it, in the first rounds of the playoffs, was the better center for the Pacers to be playing, right? No doubt about it. But there were situations where Bradley was more effective, and they continued to turn to him over and over. Can he do that again? Is he going to play and be such a good rebounder or cut down on some of his fouls or just improve in other ways? It's like, yeah, he's got to play. Like, he's got to be the third center. He should play instead of this guy or that guy. That's a question he answered last year with a yeah. That's why it sounds like he's going to be in camp this year based on all the interview answers. But he's got to, can he prove it again, right? What is his motivation level now? It's certainly going to be very high after fighting through the G League to get back to the Pacers or back to the NBA with the Pacers last year, playing in a finals. Upping his total playoff game appearances from 9 to 20 in one season. He's going to be very motivated, right? Can he beat out somebody for actual time? Because if not, he's on a non-guaranteed deal, and there's going to be constant questions about his future with the team. Should he stick around? What should they decide to do with him? If he beats nobody out, it'll be easier to answer those questions. If he beats somebody out, then things will change depending on who it is. And that is your centers preview. This will be the only one with 4 players. The power forward one's actually going to be 5. We'll do real deep dives into Siakam and Toppin, and then do a third segment on the 2-way players because it's the best place to put them. And then 3 players per episode for the final 3 positions, the wings and the guards. Really looking forward to doing this and kind of airing out some thoughts I've had about players because I just have random ping-ponging Pacers player thoughts in my head. Thank you all so much for listening today. You can find me on social media at Tony R. Reese. This podcast is at Locked On Pacers. We'll be back Monday. I'll be in D.C., so I'm about to record that one right after this one, talking about what other people, expert-wise, think of the Pacers. Do I think it's fair, or do I think it's totally off base for what should be coming for them this year? Plus a little bit of news. Thank you all so much for listening today. We will see you very soon.